Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. Don't know what to do with your hands, Travis? um, while we're trying to figure out what to do with our hands, make sure you know what to do with your hands. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you can get your email every time that we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts or questions during the show, by all means, put them up in the comment section so we can engage them directly and go from there. Now, this week's topic overall has been, or is still, hope. And we're going to be talking about that in terms of a word's worth today. That's where we're going to dive into.
Do you know what I'm hoping?
What are you
I'm hoping that I get to watch Travis try to figure out his problems for a little while longer. It's so much fun watching a highly capable guy struggle with a computer. It is awesome.
Do you not have any audio, Travis? He's got. We'll have to try and sort him out in a second. So, any thoughts or issues beforehand before we get into the conversation? Everybody's good? Okay, let's dive into it. So, a word's worth. Now, I went on to Chat GPT here a little while ago, and I kind of did some thought on this, and I wanted to come with you guys because there's no real definition I can give on this. And this is what it comes up with. A word's worth is not a standard or widely recognized term in the English language. It does not have a specific or established meaning in everyday use or within any particular field or industry. However, it's possible that a word's worth could be interpreted in a few different ways depending on the context. And I really wanted to touch on this because I think it's important. Value of a word in a literal sense could refer to the value or significance of a single word in a particular context. Or you can look at it from literary, poetic interpretation, in that the worth or significance of a word can be metaphorical or an artistic concept, and it goes further and further and further and further. So we'll go into that in a second, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on it first. James, I'm going to put you up. What are your first thoughts on a word's worth?
Well, firstly, it's not 500 words to describe the fact that you don't know what a word's worth means, like AI would say. Therein lies the problem. I think a word's worth is such a powerful term when you think about where we are today, where we have become these monkey-minded, 7 seconds of content distracted species that we are at the moment. I have found myself circling around to the simplicity of communication that has lasted for thousands of years. So for me, when I read an amazing piece of writing or I hear a podcast or a story, and it's the words that you're listening to, these things that we created to connect one human being with another, I think that's what a word's worth is. Something that has literally carried on wisdom for thousands and thousands of years. So that would be my kind of opening statement.
Interesting. Travis, what are your thoughts on a word's worth?
I kind of missed a little bit of the initial. I had some audio problems, but a word's worth. I mean, sometimes a word is all it takes, to get things started. Sometimes a word is all it takes to end things. It's obviously the way most of us communicate. There's other means, but in our day-to-day activity, I think we probably all take for granted, our ability to use words. I'm in college right now, and a lot of my upbringing was military, and we were very, very, very much about writing clear, decisive, concise, short statements about things. And now in college, they want you to embellish everything you write about and drag it out into 20 pages. And I'm finding it very difficult to accomplish that and not be so decisive in my writings. But, definitely something that you should maybe put a little thought into before you speak.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, I like words. Words are good. Words are fun. Words are powerful. Words, as has been said, words can start action, words can finish action. And the interesting thing that came to my mind about just listening to the two guests was words have worth, and that worth displays your value to some degree. Now, you don't have to say a word, and you can walk into a room and you can have value. But the moment that you open your mouth and start putting out those words, it reflects on you. It's a representation of who you are. And if you're talking like a fool, your value just went down. So a word has worth that directly impacts your value as a person in that moment. And so, one of the earliest podcasts I went on was James' podcast. I was trying to be careful with my words. I was trying to speak thoughtfully, and I kind of didn't do a great job, I felt. So James did me the privilege of letting me redo that podcast again. And I'm still not happy with it. But that's the thing about words, man. I at that time I was just speaking and maybe not crafting my words well enough, maybe not thinking about the moment, not really understanding the weight of the circumstance. So that was actually a catalyst for me to start taking the craft of speaking more seriously, so that my words have worth that add to my value as a person, either within my own mind or for others.
Got anything to add there, James? Look like you do.
Yeah, well, I want to jump into what Travis said. When you think about that, you take a concise, articulate thought process, and then you're told to elaborate and expand so it fits a certain word count. That's one of the problems I think that we have today, because how many people do we hear in whatever leadership position that they might be in that can talk for an hour and say absolutely nothing? So, it's interesting sometimes that concise format that you're needed in the military or first responders over radio, for example. Not that you're going to be talking in codes and be that acute, but the efficiency of words, I think, is also amazing. You look some of the most amazing writers like Sebastian Junger, Tribe is that thick. I think it's 130 pages or something. One of the most powerful books that I've ever read in my life. So I think words sometimes are being diluted more and more and more, and therefore the actual message within them sometimes gets lost. See politics, for example, where there was never a message and it was words just to distract. So I think articulate, concise words can be an incredibly powerful tool.
Absolutely. That's interesting. Travis, you got anything to add into that?
I agree. I mean, they're definitely powerful. Kind of tying it back to a previous, to the coaching thing, in athletics, we always tried to break things down to one word cues, just that one word to reignite your focus on one position, or, kind of one action of skills development, or things like elbows or drive or whatever your keyword might be. And honestly, the word doesn't matter as long as the word is the catalyst to that action that you want to take place, So in coaching, getting back to concise, clear messages and stuff is definitely, something to strive for. And you are right, James. It is difficult to elaborate on things where you already have kind of a frame of thought process going, and you're like the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, boom. And they're like, well, can you explain a little more? And you're like, we're 4. It's all right there.
Yeah, it is, and I think this is a fun conversation, because we are taught to be direct, concise, and to the point. We are taught to execute in a rapid fashion and create results in a rapid fashion. However, a lot of the world doesn't work like that, and so I'd like to just be able to communicate in monosyllabic. I'd just like to say one word and have my entire day unfold. But it doesn't work like that out in the big world. And so I kind of like the fact that, though I don't enjoy it most of the time, I kind of like the fact that I'm sort of obligated to become verbose, or increase my wordsmithing footprint, as it were, because in that playful sort of circus of adding too many words, it teaches me how to add some words, pull out others, and maybe change my speech patterns up a little bit so that I can communicate with a broader demographic. And if If I'm talking with someone from back in the day, the conversations don't last too long, but we're saying a lifetime's worth of words in that moment. But with others who don't know me or don't know us or don't know that life, it requires some verbosity. And if you throw out enough words in there, eventually it's like throwing the spaghetti at the wall. Eventually something sticks. I don't like playing that game all the time, but that game, as I call it, is something that has to be done from time to time. And then it's my job to gamify it into something that I enjoy rather than hate on. So if someone's challenging me to enhance your verbosity, become more verbose, it's going to irritate me, but I'll gamify it. I'll try to take it on as a personal challenge with, I won't call it growth mindset because I'm irritated, but I'll give it a go just because I know that it may be helpful for someone in the future.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting where that line is between brevity and verbosity, because if you say too little, it can be misinterpreted really easily, but if you say too much, it can also be misinterpreted really easily as well. So that's an interesting line, and I'm wondering in terms like as we said earlier, this week is going to be about hope, but how do you think that we can get people to at least take the words that we're saying and utilize them? Because again, we've said it before, deeds, not words. And now we're talking about words and how important they are and how much they're worth. So I'm wondering, how do we get others to maybe interpret our words better? What do you guys think? James, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah. You saw the blank look there.
So did I. I was hoping it to be you.
I was like, someone else. So doing what I do now with the podcast, and I'm my first book was kind of a nonfiction. My second one is fiction. So I'm diving into the world of description and words. I think the way that you get to the core of someone's soul that then hopefully would spur action is actually through story. So again, using words. So everyone here, obviously they've got a story career, and when they go on podcasts, then, people are listening so that they can hear their journey. I think that's how you do it. I mean, we've all sat through those kind of cheeseball life coach-esque people that are shouting at you, and all you got to do is get up at 4 a.m. and have a glass of water and then look at the sun and then run a 12K barefoot and jump in an ice bath. But it doesn't connect with you. But when you hear someone whose story, I mean, David Goggins, for example, we all know that he runs and shouts a lot, but really for me the power in his story is from where he was as a young man and the traumatic upbringing that he encountered through to the successful person he is now. That is the real meat of David Goggins' story. So for me, how action and words come together is through storytelling. And you look at every ancient, tribal culture, there's a homecoming story, kind of round the fire element. There's obviously drawing and dances and all these other things, but ultimately that I think is what spurs action. If you haven't got a human connection to a story that really leads you to a why, how can you expect someone to be inspired and act when you've just listed a bunch of vegetables that they need to be eating, for example, rather than let me tell you about how I got off all my meds and overcame heart disease through this diet. So that would be kind of my tie-in.
I like that. Travis, what are your thoughts initially?
Initially, it is, I don't know if it's our responsibility to make the connection to others, right? Our initial purpose is to express ourselves. If you're expressing yourself through words in some way, whether you want them to follow that diet or follow your training protocol or whatever, is to just put the words out there and express it. And if you make the decision that you're needing to connect to someone, then you can tailor those words to try to make that connection. But initially, I'm not sure it's up to us to make it. Maybe it's up to the followers or the other people to see it and then take hold of it and then ask us about it and then exchange words and communicate. But going with the intent of making a connection to everyone, I mean, I think that's a little bit grand of a endeavor. Trying to kind of niche yourself down and try to connect to certain people is probably a more feasible course of action. But again, I don't know if it's up to us to decide who really listens and who doesn't. It's up to them. Our job is to express ourselves in a way that gets their attention, I guess.
Interesting. Shaun, got anything?
Yeah, I was puzzling on this very subject this morning, of course, when I knew that it was going to be about a Wordsworth, and I sat for 5 minutes with nothing in my hand, no books, no phones, no nothing. I just sat and thought about, what would that mean to me, and what would that mean to others, and what will that mean to the panel, and what will that mean to future generations? So for 5 minutes, I considered it, and then kind of like yourself, I started thinking, well, is it my responsibility to present my words' worth, or is it for others to interpret whether my words have worth? I'm not sure. And so as I thought about it more, I thought, how would I represent my confusion in this moment? How would I capture my non-clear understanding of what a word's worth is in respect to not just my life, but this social media platform that we all tend to communicate on. So I went and grabbed a book up here on my bookshelf. It's a book that I put together myself from a 6-week trip to Vietnam, a family trip back in 2006. Our boys were about 3-ish, 4 years old at that time. And at the start of the book, I have 3 sort of columns of verbiage to kind of introduce what we're doing as the idea of the family trip, the why of the matter, as it were. And I took my time writing that. I mean, I frickin' wrote a book about it, so I'm going to take my time to write with words that have worth. So that was, back in 2006, I was a different person then. But as I read that stuff, I realized that I was really making an effort to write at that moment, along with the associated images and etc. So I put that up on my Instagram stories this morning. I didn't attach any life lessons to it. I just took a photo and threw it up and thought, maybe I'll talk about that later today. And so that represents to me my on the fence of whether our words are supposed to be put out there to help people, or whether our words are just supposed to reflect who we are authentically and just see how the chips may fall, as it were, for anyone who picks up what we're putting down. And I'm still unsure. I mean, I try to be inspiring to a degree, but I try to do it just through action. I just try to be Shaun. I try to push my pace. I try to do my thing. I say what I say. I think what I think. And if anyone picks up on that and likes it, then okay. But I'm still puzzled right to this very moment as to whether I need to dial that rotary dial up just a touch more to add a thin veneer of additional worth to the words that is called trying to actively inspire. I don't know. What do you guys think?
James?
So I think, I agree completely with what everyone said. I think where I'm coming from is, having had all the people on the show, it's more the connection between living, you're doing what you do. You're not trying to actively inspire, but a lot of people, and a good example, the people that have found their way out of a mental health crisis, they come out the other end, and all of a sudden, men, women in their community start coming out of the woodwork going, I'm going through it too. So they never actively went, I'm going to heal and then I'm going to be, a mental health advocate. They just found themselves doing that. And then what it was a connection. So I think that's it, is that being authentic is 100% what we should be doing. None of us should be, I'm going to be an inspirational whatever. But there's a point where you maybe realize, wow, my story seems to positively affect others, which is where I see some, not all, but some people in our communities then add a lot of value when they do start speaking and doing presentations and those kind of things. But there is also a fine line between authenticity and narcissism, and that's something that has to be navigated as well.
It's tricky. I've probably screwed it up a few times. I don't know. But it's not for lack of thoughtfulness. I mean, I realize that there's a slippery slope and I don't have it figured out. I'm hoping you guys will help me today, though.
Travis, you got anything?
I mean, I think James hit the nail on the head right there, where it's being authentic, and that connection, that's important. And that's where you make that connection, right? I mean, obviously, like it's people are drawn to you because of that connection, and then in your authenticity kind of expounds on that and then pulls them in tighter, like in our discussions about coaching and stuff. You're not, we talked about finding a coach that's kind of like the right coach for you, and having, background and experience and wisdom and all those things that we talked about before, like that adds to your authenticity, and when we listen to politicians on the telly talking about how they're going to make everything great, we can see that they're not authentic in their words. Their words are not true. They're just empty, so they have no weight, they have no meaning, so that authenticity is significant when it comes to wordsmithing.
Absolutely. It's I do just want to throw this up real quick for anybody watching. By all means, if you guys got any comments or questions, throw it up in the comment section. I would like to hear what your guys' thoughts are on a word's worth as well. So this kind of leads into what I was thinking about misinterpreted responsibility, in that you can spout a lot of words, especially on social media, right? This is the new realm that we're all kind of in that we can just throw words to the world. And you can be authentic or you cannot be authentic. You can try to espouse authenticity without actually utilizing it. So I'm wondering how do we find our own responsibility within that realm? How do we find our own, not so much niche, but find the tribe within the tribe, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Does that make any sense, or am I off base here? Shaun?
Well, in the spirit of things, I think what I'm hearing anyway is how do you connect with a group that feels right for you based on what they're saying? Is that what you're?
Yes, that's where I was going with, yeah.
Okay. So for me, whatever group I'm in is determined by the kind of cool people that I want to hang out with. And I use that term casually a lot. I like cool people, man. I like hanging out with cool people. But cool is a simple word that its worth only means, happy days and Fonzie, cool. Versus to me, being cool is like, it's got many layers and it means many things to me. And so if someone's cool and if someone's really cool and if someone's mega cool, they all mean different things to me. So that word cool in and of itself has different worth based on the person in front of me. I seek people that are cool, whatever that means. And that typically entails them being authentic. And it doesn't mean that they have to be setting world records all the time or ever. They just got to be a cool person, authentically legit, real, in the moment, not faking it, just cool. So I think if you're just pursuing people that feel right to you, that's a good start. You can start diving deeper in that group as you find the group that just feels right. Words for me are less about the how to spell it. Words are more about the feel of it, the vibe of it, the intention, the tone that I get from a person. Someone can say a sentence to me and someone can say that exact same sentence to me, and those two people will have different meanings based on the vibe I pick up. And so to the point about politics and how there's a lot of empty talk out there, or the words don't have much worth, etc. Well, I don't have to hear them. I don't have to hear the precise words. I get the feeling from it. And so someone can talk a good tale. They can write all the books. But if they don't feel right to me, then I don't care what they have to say. It's a vibe. It's whether I synchronize with them or not. That's what I would say, in looking for a group, as it were.
Interesting. Travis, I'm going to come to you next. What are your thoughts?
I think if you're trying to find a group or find a tribe or something, the first thing, like the most important thing is to just listen, right? Give yourself time to gather some data. and keep listening. Probably beyond the point where you think it's time for you to make a comment. You should just listen a little bit longer and try to keep figuring out what is the authentic self. Like, what is this tribe about? Like, do their morals align with mine? Does their motivation align with mine? Is this my tribe or not? And you do that by listening and initially, once you've decided that there's enough to interject some of your words into the mix and then start to communicate, then that's kind of a point in time you're going to have to decide on your own. But listening, I think, is a key component there. And I think especially now with social media and so much of our existence online being an attempt to get noticed, people are very apt to speak first and listen later, when in real life you should listen first and maybe not speak at all.
James?
Well, firstly, just to underline what Travis just said, we have a screen split into 4 right now, but the difference is we're listening. How many news stations and sports stations do you have where there's 4 people just talking on top of each other, arguing with each other, and saying absolutely nothing? So just a little observation there. My kind of take on this as well is is agreeing, but coming from a different angle. What I found doing the podcast with like 830 interviews now, is if you're not careful, you can also choose a tribe by its veneer. And if you can actually find the commonalities with an individual who may be the opposite of the way you think politically, or, not be into the same sports, or, support leads, so those kind of things, you're looking at that pigeonhole, that label. Whereas the commonality is coffee, fitness, cycling, whatever. And so I think this is a big skill for a lot of us, is to find where you connect with that person. As you push out, it may be very superficial. I don't know if you've had this, but I find that boyfriends or husbands of my wife's friends, just because my wife and her friend are friends doesn't mean that we're going to be friends. And there's a lot of times I've had conversations like, okay, I think, there's not a lot for us to talk about there. And that's okay. That is okay. You start where the commonality is and you push out. So for me, it's amazing how many unique individuals I've really connected with on the show, who at first glance, well, they're all over here, or they're a ballet dancer or a model, or not stuff that I would normally, or an influencer on YouTube. Not usually the person I would immediately pick out of a crowd and go, we're going to be friends. But then you start in the middle and you push out, and then you realize that you do. So I would say, to add to this, when everyone's tribe's going to look different and it's going to be very eclectic. And if you allow yourself to start in the middle and get out of your comfort zone with some of these people, you'll be amazed how different ways of thinking actually add to this kind of tapestry of friends that you have. And that can be very valuable, and therefore make you a lot less blinkered in the way you look at the world.
John, thoughts?
Yeah, I like that. I like what both fellas said, and I'd just like to add a touch more, just to kind of stir the pot a little bit. I think that you should listen way more than talk, but I think that there's a time when you have to talk, of course. And how long is that? Who knows? Depends on the group that you're in and how you feel about the moment. But the great thing about finally talking into a group that you've been pretty quiet for a while is now you get a feedback loop. Now you get a sense of where you fit into the group even more for real, because what you say might synchronize with the group, or it might not synchronize with the group the way that you thought it would. Now there's a great opportunity to recalibrate or redetermine why you're in the group, or what you just said and how it was understood by the group. Well, that's a good reflection point. I'm not saying that your very first words are going to be really, really wrong. What I'm saying is, if you're quiet for quite a while and get a feel for things, and then you start talking and you're getting some, not pushback, but a little bit of recalibration, that's not a point to panic. That's not a moment to get worried. That's a moment to be pretty pleased that you've got something to work on, to improve on, that the group is asking you to recalibrate on.
there's a lot of power in silence, I think, and there's I wanted to talk about this a little bit in terms of I've had some experiences where I've tried to talk to somebody and then stop to think about the words that I'm going to use next, and then get rushed. Be like, well, the longer you're silent, the more I get worried, kind of deal. And so I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on specifically how important that pause is, or being able to manage within that silence, because I think a lot of people out there don't know how to deal with that silence, in that pause, in that to stop and listen. I don't know if many people know how to do that. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on the power of that silence in and of itself. James, what do you think? Always coming back to you. Bam.
This is my superpower here. I don't know if you can tell, it's all bleached out by that light. A piece of paper and a pen. Now, obviously, we're not talking about normal conversation. The number of times that I'm listening, and I've hopefully become better at listening over 7 years, and you just write down, I want to ask this thing, or I want to say this thing. The number of times that the person carries on, they pause, and then when they are done, they're like, oh, they actually did talk about that thing, and you get rid of it, or they didn't, and you circle around. But for me, it's just simply allowing someone to finish their organic thought process. And that's where I think body language comes in. It's harder to do that over the phone, for example. But if I'm here and I'm looking up to the sky a second, okay, well, obviously he's still trying to pull something out of that tiny little brain of his. I'll give him a moment. But I think that the reason we step over each other, and I can say this because I saw it in myself, was, oh, I've got to say this thing or I'm going to forget. And so piece of paper, or kind of mental piece of paper, working on that muscle memory to like, okay, this is going in my filing cabinet. I want to say this in a minute. And just allowing yourself to be there and be quiet and have that silence and let that person fully finish what they were going to say is an incredibly powerful tool. But it takes work. I mean, it's taken me a long, long time to get it. And now I think finally I can, like, I don't even look at my question sheets anymore. I write all these bullet points down and then never even glance at them. So obviously there's been a progress, but simply allowing someone to finish what they were going to say without interrupting, and getting rid of that, if I don't say it, I'm going to forget, that we all do, and step over each other. That is, I think, how you have these incredible conversations. And if you had, for example, the screen split and you had 4 politicians, but they did that, it would be a completely different conversation. And also, if you knew you weren't getting interrupted, now you'd have to say something that actually makes sense because everyone's listening. So, there's a double win there.
Absolutely. Travis, thoughts?
The silence gives you time to formulate your words. It gives you time to actually think about what you're going to say and make sure that the words do have, some weight. My very first platoon leader, I remember thinking to myself, when it seemed like whenever he encountered a dilemma, there was a noticeable, borderline uncomfortable pause before he started to direct traffic. And I remember as a young troopy, I was kind of like, what the hell is he doing? Like, do something. Like you're in a hurry because you're young and fool. At least I was young and foolish, and I'm like, do something. Like, something is better than nothing. Like, but he was smarter than me, and he's figuring out what he's going to do, and he's taking that time to make sure that his words are the right words, and then that people can understand them, and that the proper actions take place as a result of those words. So give yourself time to think about what you're going to say. Again, I think social media kind of conditions the populace to speak quickly and not really think about what they say, and that's a problem. So take a pause and think about it.
Interesting. Shaun?
Yeah, that's a great example that until you told that story, I hadn't really considered how to put this point across, but now is a perfect opportunity, because that leader, that wise leader who was taking that momentary pause to consider what the next right move was, he was doing the right thing, whereas you hadn't maybe been in the game quite long enough to understand what was going on. But what was interesting in that moment is your response. You were target locked on him with the thought of what's next? What's going to happen? What? Now he's got your attention. And I think that's communication as well. Even in conversations like this, if I pause for a moment, someone out there is considering, why is he pausing? What's going on? What's next? What is important? What is going to be said? And so strategically or tactically, I think within speech or within communication styles or within choosing correct words, there's just levels to the game, and I'm like at a level 3, and there's another million levels above me. And if I can get up to level 10 by the end of, I don't know, this decade, well, my speech, my tonality, my intonation, my ability to communicate will be improved simply by pausing and thinking about how to better communicate in the moment. And people who are paying attention, well, now they're wondering, what's next? Why is this important? And it's a great way to have others think, what is going on? Once they understand what is going on, maybe 10, 20, 100 repetitions later of seeing that same moment, just like yourself, you can now understand that there is importance in pausing. And what it does do is put some eyeballs on you in that moment that you're pausing. And unless you're a confident speaker or you're in his case, a confident leader or a skilled leader, he would have been uncomfortable pausing if he didn't understand that it was necessary for him to do that in order to deliver the best to the team at that time. If he was just pausing and panicking, that's an entirely different thing. But for lack of a better term, a tactical pause within your communication style, even if it's only for 2 or 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever, it doesn't matter. A tactical pause gives you time and gives the demographic in front of you time to kind of really tune in, get on the edge of the seats.
James, any additional thoughts on that?
I just can see many examples of. I had a leader in the fire service in Anaheim, Terry, and it was funny because he had this big bushy mustache, like the chef from the Muppet Show. But his mustache would literally go up while he was thinking, and you just wait, and just like you're saying, you'd all be there on bated breath, and then he'd be like, "Okay, get on the roof, go cut a hole," and then off you go. But it was very much that pause, and he was the kind of guy that didn't go moth to the flame. I remember one big fire we had, a massive pallet farm. I don't know why they call it farms, I don't grow them, but anyway, like 30 feet of pallets on fire. There was a mulch pile next to it that was on fire. Fire engines were melting. It was an absolute nightmare, and he just looked at the scene and said, "Get back in," and we all drove to the back of this fire, cut a fence, rescued a couple of firefighters, and then spent the rest of the night putting out this massive campfire. But it was just his ability to take a step back, and it was that pause. And in the meantime, just like you said, us young firefighters were just waiting, and just like, okay, we understand as a leader, this is how he is. So stand by, get in that kind of amber zone. And then when he says go, then off we go. So yeah, just to underline that point.
Yeah. Travis, any additional thoughts there?
Like being a, through my career, like starting off as that young troop and listening to the PL and like being intent, fast forward 20 years to where now you're, in the assault force, and you're some guy back in the talk is totally clogging up the radio waves, trying to find out what's going on. And you're like, stand by. And you're letting the situation develop a little bit. So there is like some valuable information to actually pass across the net rather than just talking and accomplishing nothing. So, that pause and allowing yourself to think about what's happening, to let the situation itself develop some, and to formulate your words properly and accomplish what you want to accomplish, and selecting those words based on that end is important. So that I guess tactical pause is a very good name for that pause.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I'm getting this kind of picture built in my head as you guys are talking, and I'm thinking it's like, worth is a great word for it in terms of there's a value placed upon these things. So I'm thinking in terms of money, like if you don't have a lot of money, you're going to spend that carefully. You're going to utilize it well. To some degree. Some people do, some people don't. But I think if you have tons of money and you don't know what to do with it, and you just start splaying it out all over the place, it has no value to you. It has no worth in terms of like intrinsic worth. And so I'm just thinking that a word's worth really is only as much as you're willing to put into it.
I was thinking the same thing. I almost threw the word out a few minutes ago. The word to me is promise. I might have said this to James, I'm not sure, some time ago. But my promises are like, they're rare jewels. I use them so rarely. To me, a promise is a blood pact, in a sense. If I say I promise that's going to happen, put your life on it. And that's why I rarely ever make promises to myself or to anyone else. If I'm saying promise, it's got worth. Now, conversely to that, if someone's promising a lot of things on a regular basis and not delivering against all of those promises, now that word doesn't have worth for them or to anyone else. And so if I'm standing next to someone who's making that same promise, and that MO or that standard issue pattern is what it is, and mine is what it is, my promise now has far more worth than that promise. And then it becomes that case of the boy who cried wolf or the boy who cried word. And so I think it comes down to words have power for sure, based on who's giving those words out, based on their track record of their words, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. James, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think now we've kind of found our way to the kind of urban dictionary sense of the word, which is, when I say it, I'm going to do it. And I think it's really hard. I think the hardest place to keep your word is as a parent, especially when you're still in uniform. I promise that we'll do this thing, and then you get to, as a firefighter, 7:30 a.m. and the phone rings, and like, we're short staffed. You need to stay another 24 hours. Well, you just broke your word to your child. So I think in these professions, your word is your bond. Like, if your firefighter friend goes down, it's an unspoken word that I'm going to go in there and try and pull you out. And when I'm training, I'm getting myself to the point where whatever kind of maximum capacity this little body of mine has, that I'm going to be able to drag your ass out, and vice versa. So I think the word in our professions is a very, very powerful thing. I think what makes it so maddening when you see a word not followed through so often, whether it's, maybe in the admin side of your profession, maybe it's outside, certainly in politics, when come hell or high water, you would literally lay down your life for the person that you're going in to help, or the man or woman to the left or right of you. And then you go into the civilian world, and even the most basal thing, like, a company saying, we'll do this then, and then you just get messed around. You're like, if this was in my profession, your word, if I didn't keep my word, people would die. And yet you use it so superfluously, and it has zero value to you. So I think, I don't know if this is something you agree with, but to me, when you hold your word so strongly and you really mean it, and even if you, with that child, you're like, I didn't, like, my absolute, laser focus now is to do that thing that I promised you on a different day. We will do it. It'll just be a different day now, but I promise you we will go. And you are using that word promise. I think that being so far from words, promises that are used by other people in other situations is probably why a lot of us get so perturbed and angry, because you truly understand the depth that a word means in a profession where lives are truly at stake.
Travis, you got any thoughts on that?
I'd like, just elaborate on that exact thing. Like, I think coming from kind of the professions that we have come from, our backgrounds, either in military, first response, something like that, there's kind of a certain cluster of words that these professionals, they truly have meaning, like truth. What is the truth? The absolute truth, we hold that dear. You know, if someone were to call one of us a liar, that would be, I mean, those are fighting words, man. You know, whereas in the civilian population, like, you're a liar, you know, it's no big deal. Like to me, I mean, if you call me a liar, we're going to have words, bro. We're going to exchange words at a minimum, you know. So those things, you know, time is very important to me, you know. And if you give me a time that we're going to link up and you're not there, I'm thinking something must be wrong. You know, you told me you're going to be here at this time and you're not. Like, are you okay? You know, was there an emergency? Did you crash? Oh no, dude, I was just, you know, running a little late. Like, no, I don't know. I don't understand. You know, what's wrong with you? You know, like those, like, so in these professions, we there's some words that we really, you know, I don't know, we really hold on to them, I guess. You know, their meaning is just decisive and we don't let go of that. And then, and like you said, in professions where maybe life is not really, you know, in jeopardy, it's like, it's not a big deal, you know. And there's a little bit of an adjustment period that goes along with that. You know, if, like I've said before, I'm sitting in college, and if I see a student walk into class 5 minutes late and it's no big deal, it just, like, my mind is blown. And the professor doesn't even say anything. I'm just like, what is going on? You know, I don't understand. You know, because I've been raised up where those words mean stuff, you know?
Yeah. 100%. Shaun?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the reason that I find it infuriating, because I think the exact same way. Now, the only way to correct that, or at least in my world, I can't correct the world, but in my world, if someone interacts with me and infers that I'm a liar, or maybe more correctly, comes real close to calling me a liar, and this happened just a couple of years ago, I just looked that person square in the eyes and I said, "Did you just call me a liar? Are you calling me a liar right now?" And you've never seen anyone backtrack so fast, because people aren't used to being held accountable. They don't know the worth of a word that they casually throw around, whereas the word that they're throwing casually at me, I full well know the meaning of the word. And them's fighting words, just as you said, buddy. So I think it comes down to people's maybe background or experience or how they've been raised, for sure. But I also think it comes down to they just ain't being held accountable often enough in the moment. And so I do believe it's our job not to give out all those hallway passes when someone says, "Dude, you're a freaking liar." What? There's no hallway pass in that moment. Time to correct the record, as it were.
That brings up an interesting thought here, and I have this comment that it plays into it. Tom jumps in and he says, when using words, ensure that you're imparting wisdom rather than trying to convince others of your opinion, which I think is really interesting. And he carries on. He says, Epictetus tells us, keep silence for the most part and speak only when you must. And then briefly. I think it goes into it in terms of you have to put thought into what you're talking about. And as we've been hearing these words, you know, liar, timings, accountable, valor, courage, honor, these things mean stuff to us, right? They have intrinsic value. I don't need to tell you what honor means. You all know. And I know you know, and you know I know. Like, these things are just ubiquitous. And so, being that this week we're talking about hope, what I want to know from you guys is, what does hope mean to you guys? Because I think this is what is it worth out there to you? James, what do you think?
Hope is my jam. It's the one thing that we don't get. It really isn't. And then you think about this. I was having a conversation with a guest earlier, and he talked about a teacher who told him he'd never amount to nothing. And in that particular occasion, it was fuel for him. And I think I would argue probably people sitting in this particular conversation, it would be that FU attitude, you know, I don't care what you say, I'll show you kind of thing. But the conversation was, well, how many kids had he disarmed? How many kids had he taken the wind out of their sail because of that? And then you look at today, you know, the conversation that I was so lucky to have, like from my mom, for example, was truly that you can be anything. And my grades show I couldn't be anything at that moment, but at least the dream was put in my head. But I don't think we see hope much anymore. We don't have people standing in, whatever, whether it's, your actual profession, whether it's, a county or a country, inspiring people, saying we can be better. I mean, just to pick on, for example, America's obesity crisis at the moment. Where is the conversations about you can get back to who you want to be? You can be slim, you can be, mobile, you can play with your kids. We can get you through this mental health crisis that you're going through. We can get you off fentanyl. There's none of that. There's no hope out there. Yet people will go into whatever place of worship they choose, and those books actually give hope. And then they close them and they walk out, and then they go through the social media, doom and gloom thing again. So I think if hope is the most powerful word, and its worth is, everything. And you look at some of these incredible, men and women, and we talked about losing legs in the military, for example. Look at Rob Jones and Mark Ormrod and some of these incredible human beings that just believed, and they are beacons of hope. Like, you're just going through long COVID and you're still suffering. Look at these people and use that as hope. But I think the issue I see is it's all negativity. It's all doom and gloom. The Russians and the Chinese are going to come and invade us, and we're all going to be speaking, and that's it, the end of the story. What we need is hope. We need people to inspire us. We need people to pull us together, because hope, there is hope. Like, we're not in the middle of, Mogadishu right now in the 90s. We're not in the middle of Syria at the moment. We're in the US, so we have so many resources. All we need is hope. All we need is people to be inspired and believe that they can be so many more things than they are. And those are the voices I think we need to hear. It is the voices of hope, because that is one of the most powerful tools. And we talked about how do you connect, words with someone's actions. I think it's hope, but they have to believe it. And I think the power of story is really what infuses hope into a lot of people.
Oh, preach it, buddy, preach it.
Yeah, bam. Yeah, absolutely. Travis, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think obviously hope is super important, but I think hope is maybe the second domino, right? It's the second thing to have to take place. Is first you have to see or recognize whatever it is that you may want or desire, and then that's when hope manifests, right? I want that. I want to be like that guy. I want to be the champion. I want to be free. I want to not listen to this guy, whatever it is. But hope is that second domino. And then the long line of dominoes after hope that take place, hope, and then motivation, drive, like all of those buzzwords of the motivational process are what falls into place next. I think getting onto the topic of like what you see now with like the obesity epidemic and like so many other things that are wrong with the society today. It just has to do, for me, it has to do with culture. The culture is kind of off base, and our culture choose to deify entertainers and athletes and people who they have their own contribution to society, but I wouldn't say that they contribute the same thing that a police officer does, or a firefighter does, or a farmer does, or a plumber, or electrician, or a guy that builds roads, or any of those things that have to take place for society to progress and just to exist. We don't deify those things at all. They're just kind of almost an
afterthought, just like that. Yeah. Shaun.
Well, he was on a roll there, and I was like nodding my head thinking, how much more can I agree with this? What's more than 100%? I think that there is a wild difference between entertainers and helpers. So if you're an entertainer, you ain't a plumber. A plumber's out there helping people. A fireman's out there helping people. They're not entertaining people. And so I don't want to say too much more about the difference between helping humanity and entertaining humanity, because it's a whole other hour-long conversation probably, but I fully agree with what was just said. I think for me, hope, and though we did talk about it yesterday, what comes to mind is based on what James was saying, just as his mom maybe told him. Like, I didn't have much hope when I was a kid. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I'm not saying I was hopeless. I'm just saying that I just didn't see the hope in the world. I didn't see hope in front of me. I was a skinny, underperforming kid in high school, and I didn't know what I could do or what challenges I could overcome until the army. The army taught me how to get hope. The army put the challenges in front of me that I needed in order to learn more about myself and to become a better person, in order to become a more capable person, in order to have words, to be able to speak that had a little bit of power in them. So the army taught me how to understand hope, if that makes sense.
I I want to touch on something that James you said kind of at the beginning. I'm not sure if it was right at the beginning or if it was still in the green room, but you were talking about how 9/12 was the most American America you can see kind of deal, and I've seen that verbiage a few times, but it seems to me that that was the most hopeful kind of point in that I've seen the U.S. at least, as well as Canada. I mean, we're so tied to the hip in terms of culturally speaking that when after 9/11 happened and that next day where everybody was just like, what do you need? How can I help? Where can we dive in? How do we get involved? What can we do? And it seems to me that hope in and of itself is actually built through the other people, like seeing other people help through other actions. That's my thought on it. But what do you guys think? Am I on base there? Or am I out of the way? Travis, what do you think?
The greatest thing about September 12th was that every single American and every Westerner really stopped thinking about what makes us different and recognized what makes us all the same, right? We all became one giant tribe that moment, right? The day prior, right now everybody sees themselves as, different sex, different race, different religion, different political, ideology, like whatever it is, they're all different, right? I'm different. I'm not the same as him. I'm not the same as that. But in that moment when things got real, when there was a decisive moment in time where everybody recognized that, like, oh, we're all the same tribe. We're all together in this, and we need to give way together in order to come out victorious. So that just made everybody unite. And by recognizing what makes us the same, that's when you really see the power of the United States, of Canada, of any country. Like, division is not what makes it strong. Diversity is not what makes it strong. It gives us a good menu and the chow is good, but unity is what makes us strong. Being unified despite of our diverse background is what makes us strong.
Mm-hmm. James?
I wish I could remember who it was, but I had a guest give an analogy a few months ago, and they said, imagine you're in medieval England and you're looking over the walls with your, lord or lady, and you're chuckling because all the villagers are fighting amongst themselves. He goes, where are they not looking? The castle. And it was such a perfect way of describing how we are now. One of the most clear things over the last, 6-8 years, so that spans both sides of the aisle, is if you consider someone who's a leader, that's someone who unites, especially when there's a crisis going on. And yet the last 6+ years in the States, 6 or 7 years, has been nothing but division. So this is the problem, is we haven't had leadership. We have had that divide and conquer element. And what 9/12/2001 showed me, and it was the same if you look at the footage from the Grenfell fire in London, churches, synagogues, temples, you name it, everyone came together. Everyone was a New Yorker. And we've allowed ourselves to go back to, all the pigeonholes, all the labels. And I think that, leadership begins at home and then in your community. And it's not just looking at some, building in DC or London or whatever and thinking, all right, you fix everything. But it showed the true America, after the London bombings. It showed the true spirit of the British and the Londoners. And that, the sad thing is that is so quickly lost. And if you look at a few years later, the FDNY firefighters and NYPD, they're all dying from 9/11 illnesses, and now they're fighting to even give them any sort of kind of financial benefits. That was lost. It wasn't too long that it was forgotten again, and things started slipping backwards. So the power of the word, for example, is that you'll take care of the people that stepped up when you needed them, whether they were holding the line during the COVID crisis, whether they showed up to the Grenfell fire. And then another perfect example, it was only a few weeks later that the media was saying that it was the firefighters' fault in London. And the same people that were rescued all those families from that tower building were now lauded as, at fault, when actually it was the cladding on the tower that caused everything to be on fire, and that was a business, and they weren't. So I think refinding that community, you shouldn't have to wait for a national disaster or a tragedy or a terrorist attack to pull yourself back together again. But if we're having something to the magnitude that 9/11 was, and then 22 short years later, we've completely forgotten the message, then I think that spits in the face of every single person that was killed in 9/11. Because if one thing we can do after that horrendous day is make our country better, and that involves us all being part of the solution and coming together. And if someone stands in a political building and deliberately divides a nation, then we need to change the way that we select those people. Because you want to destroy a country, then you just divide and conquer. It's that simple.
Well, the irony of today as we speak about the worth of words is it just seems to be that more and more frequently the messaging out there in respect to national messages is the inability for politicians to even form a coherent sentence nowadays. The words that are being put out are not as well put out as what I'm hearing from the panel right now. They're either sound bites or they're canned pieces that are sometimes read word for word not very well, or sometimes it's just like incoherent babble from some that are just babbling over top of each other. So it's pretty easy to understand why there's divisiveness right now. I mean, just remove all of the divisive issues. Let's not even talk about them. Let's just talk about the talk about the divisiveness. That's just so divisive right now that we don't have to identify new divisive issues. The way that things are being communicated at a national, at an international level is appalling, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is, and this gets into a whole nother conversation, which we will carry on tomorrow. Absolutely. I think that's a great place to shut her down for the day. So let's get some final thoughts and go from there. What are your final thoughts, Travis? Words worth?
I thought we were about to go political, so I was super excited. But,
No.
Not on this show.
I'm all in. You can count me in for that conversation. But getting back to the start, the power of words. They have all the power to start things and all the power to end things. It's just one word. It could mean everything. It could mean nothing. It's it comes back to the authenticity of those words and the authenticity of the person delivering them. I think that really matters. But without them, it'd be really hard for us all to communicate. I mean, the podcast wouldn't be so good without words.
Very true. Yeah, we'd just be miming our way through. James, some final thoughts?
You've actually, just to add on to what Travis said, here is one of the saddest things, I think, when we're talking about words. Now you talk about the health of the nation, you talk about mental health, you talk about unity. Oh, well, that's politics. The word politics is basically saying you can't talk about that. And I disagree completely. So not diving into that whole thing, but this is where we also need to be careful, is health is not politics. Community is not politics. Mental health is not politics. Making our schools safer is not politics. These are things that actually are beneficial to the men, women, and children of our country. So I would say with your words, make sure that some words aren't censoring words.
Shaun, final thoughts?
Hard to conclude anything beyond what has just been said, other than do your best to choose your words carefully with the audience that you're speaking to, the person who's directly in front of you. what you're trying to say to them, not just with your words, but with your vibe, with your intention, with the way you hold your space. Before you say a word, try to be saying words.
Yeah, these are some absolutely outstanding points. Thank you guys so much for the conversation. First off, Travis and James, it's always good to have you on here. And you guys, like I said many times, open seat any day you want. Welcome back for a convo. Maybe not on politics, but we'll see what happens later on in the future. I do really appreciate it. Been a really, really interesting show, and I really appreciate the ability not only of your words to stimulate thought. It allows people to engage their own thought pattern, and once they do that, then that means they're learning. And if they're learning, they're building, and if they're building, that means they're growing. And you can do that with us every day here on the Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.